Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartlidge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. We will start today's episode where I am excited to welcome to this conversation two amazing guests. First, we have our show's last episode's guest joining us again, Irith Bloom, and today though she'll also be joined by another past ATA podcast guest, Dr. Kristina Spaulding. And the reason we are hosting these two fantastic individuals is because they have paired up, and with their fantasticness combined, they have created a new program called Carefree Companions, which we're going to be talking about in today's episode. Just a brief intro for both, though, before we dive in. Dr. Kristina Spaulding first is a renowned scientist and behaviorist with a PhD in biopsychology. As a certified applied animal behaviorist and author of The Stress Factor in Dogs, she specializes in the neurobiology of stress and its profound impact on behavior. Kristina currently serves as Vice President of the IAABC Foundation Board and is an adjunct professor at Virginia Tech. She is a master at translating complex research into practical, actionable strategies for professionals handling the most challenging behavior cases. Irith Bloom is a master practitioner and biologist with over 40 years of animal training experience, holding certifications including CPDT-KSA and CDBC. Irith serves as co-secretary of the IAABC Foundation Board and is author of Your Puppy and You. She is a global speaker recognized for her expertise in the science of learning and the power of agency. Irith has a particular interest in supporting people with their animal behavior work, utilizing her certifications like Tag Teach to help coach clients through meaningful behavior change. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome both of these wonderful humans to the show today who are patiently waiting by. Thank you so much, Kristina and Irith, for taking the time to come and hang out with me here at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you for having us, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Every time I say that, it feels weird. Coming to hang out with me here is like we're in like totally different parts of the planet. I don't really know where here is in my Zoom account. Thanks for coming to hang out in my Zoom account.
Yeah, and Kristina and I are a good 5-hour plane flight apart too. So none of us are really anywhere near each other.
You guys are practically neighbors.
We live on opposite sides of the coast and almost opposite, like we're almost as far as you can get from each other in the continental US. So
it took me and my family 42 hours door to door to get to my wife's parents' house.
Wow.
Wow.
And that was a relatively short transit. All right, let's dive in. And how about we do that by you guys taking us back to where this partnership began between the two of you. Am I correct? You're both currently on the IAABC Foundation board, but did you meet on another committee
Yes. Do you want to go, Irith?
Sure. So many years ago, in a land far, far away, just to sort of stay on topic, Kristina and I both served on the APDT education committee, which is how we originally met. At the time, I was either chair or co-chair, I can't remember which. And ultimately, we wound up being, wait, were we co-chairs together? Am I inventing that? No, it's me and Joanne, isn't it? I don't know. We might have been co-chairs. You can tell that the exact details are a little fuzzy, I think, because it was a long time ago. And also it wasn't the kind of committee where there was a lot of sort of difference between leadership and membership, which I think makes it even fuzzier in our minds. And we just hit it off. And we and someone who I know was my co-chair on that committee at one point, Joanne Rechtine, the three of us just, got along incredibly well. And we wound up deciding we needed to do something together. And Joanne at the time was running seminars for Mike Shikashio, actually. And so she had all this experience organizing seminars, and she said, well, I could organize seminars for the two of you. And we created a partnership and started doing seminars together on the topic of choice. Actually, the seminars were called The Power of Choice. And I can't remember when that was. I feel like it's going on 10 years ago.
Well, I don't think it's quite that long because, the first seminar was going to be in 2020.
Oh, right.
And yeah, because I remember that because it was going to be in person. I don't even remember where, Asheville, maybe?
Yes, we were going to go to Joanne's beautiful home in Asheville, and she had some kind of setup for us, some location set up.
Yeah. But then, COVID happened and everyone knows that story. So, but in terms of when we were on the education committee, I don't quite know. Well, let's see. I got my Member of the Year award in 2019, and I think you got yours before me.
I have a feeling I got it in 2017, and then Joanne got it in 2018. So you can see there's a lot of connections with the three of us. So I think we are going on 10 years of just working together in one capacity or another.
And you mentioned choice was your topic of your potential. Was that topic a thing that pulled you guys together in terms of you were interested in that? Because I feel like I've talked to you guys in off podcast conversations and obviously podcast conversations, you read in our last recording, and everyone, when I say everyone, obviously not everyone has a bell curve, but the average person in our industry is very interested in choice. But for you guys, you've seemingly mentioned it quite specifically, choice, agency, like this is something that we are really, really interested in. Was it that drew you to each other and your interest in that specific component of what we do?
I don't think so. I mean, it's so funny because you're asking these questions and I don't remember. I would say the clearest memory that I have of working with Irith, the earliest clear, I feel like I'm talking about a childhood memory, but the earliest clearest memory that I have of working with Irith is sitting at an APDT conference, and her and I and Joanne were talking, and we decided we should do a seminar together. But I don't think we came into it saying we're doing a seminar on choice. I think we decided we should do a seminar together because we enjoyed working together so much. So you would think that if we enjoyed working together so much, we might have earlier memories. I don't know if you do, Irith. I mean, I know obviously that I was on the committee with her, but in terms of specifics, I think we just work very well together. Like we're just very, I don't know, symbiotic. Is that the right word?
I like that. That's a great word. I love that description of our relationship. So I'm going to agree with Kristina. Like I remember working with you, but as like just committee stuff, which was not necessarily specifically about choice because that's not really the education committee at APDT. I don't know what their mission is now, but at the time their purpose was not that kind of thing. It was about figuring out who would make good speakers and provide good education and that kind of thing. And I think that so we just worked together doing committee stuff. And then, as you said, we had that conversation in Portland, right? I think it was Portland, Oregon at the APDT conference.
Yeah.
And after we decided we were going to do a seminar, then we started brainstorming topics. And because Kristina is, I mean this in the most loving way possible, this phrase does not sound very loving. You are like the queen of stress, if you know what I mean. Like, you're such an expert on stress. So because Kristina has this incredible expertise on stress, and I was obsessed with the topics of choice and control, you know, even before that, somewhere in there, I think we wound up deciding that choice and stress were really what we should lean into in the seminar. And I think it's also informed that background and that shared interest in stress and control and how they relate, and all of these pieces, agency, as you know, as the term has grown and blossomed. I really love how we use the term agency now. I think all of that is something that we share this deep interest in, and we really feel is key to everything.
And we both place a lot of value on science and the interpretation and application of science, and also that intersection between science and practical experience, because it's not, I really don't think we can get the best outcomes if we're just, or maybe outcomes isn't quite the right word. If we're just looking at the science and only reading at the science, and you don't have that practical experience, then you're missing a lot. But at the same time, if people just have the practical experience and they're not staying up on the science, they're also missing a lot. So where I think we can get the greatest potential for impact is to combine those two things together. So not that science is better than practice or practice is better than science, but bringing them together so that they can each inform the other is, I think, and I think Irith agrees with me. I know Irith agrees with me. I'm just going to speak for you. But that's the best way, I think, that we can increase our knowledge and ability to help animals as quickly as possible and as ethically as possible.
My wife is also the queen of stress. No, joking, love you, baby. So agency and science and bringing those two together, and I picked up, you said it's not one or the other, it's one and the other.
Yes.
That's a big theme for us. It's one and the other, not one or the other. It comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. It's what crucial conversations call the sucker's choice. And so much as if you're having a hard conversation, people in general, some people might choose between offending someone but telling the truth, or not expressing their needs but keeping everyone happy, whilst the book and ideas are trying to say, no, this and this. But that's really hard to do.
It takes a lot of practice. I mean, I feel like the first year or so that the two of us were really discussing this concept of what I will call andness, which is dialectics, I spent a lot of time saying, or I mean and. Or I mean, and now I'm at the point where I don't do that anymore. I almost, once in a long while, but almost uniformly, I'm able to say, this is frustrating and I know it will improve. Instead of saying something like, this is frustrating, but I hope it will improve. I was just the first example that hopped in my head. Sorry, it's not a perfect example, but I really think it's life altering. I really do think it's life altering to embrace, and both things can be true. Both things can be possible in many cases. And sometimes it's 4 or 5 or 17 things that can be true and possible at the same time.
And I think, we're both in the United States, and I know that this is going to vary widely depending on where you are. But I think a lot of educational systems really focus heavily on finding the correct answer. And so maybe I should explain that a little bit more, finding the correct answer, which is, of course, assuming that every situation has a single correct answer, which is often not true in the real world. And I remember very clearly when I was teaching undergraduate students when I was in graduate school that students would get very angry and panicky with answers like, it depends, and it's complicated. And I think it just goes against so much of what they were taught. And I will not get into a critique of current educational systems, but it's a very normal struggle for people to have, right? Is to want to pick the correct answer, but there often isn't a single correct answer. I'm not going to say there never is, it is something that I think being able to accept that and embrace that and get comfortable with that really can improve our ability to effectively train and help animals, because it's more reflective of reality.
And if I can pick up on that thread, it's something that I see is often really important when we're working with people who live with companion animals and have frustrations or challenges around their life with that companion animal. I think that they often feel like, well, how can I love Fifi this much and be so angry with Fifi when she does X, Y, or Z? And it's an extra source of stress for the human. And stress is not helpful for any of us. It's not helpful for the non-human animals. It's not helpful for the human animals. So it can be helpful for us as practitioners to model to our clients that these two apparently conflicting things can both be true. You can love Fifi and want to rehome her because she did the thing for the 40th time and you're just so frustrated with her. And that doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means you're human, and we often have conflicting feelings and thoughts and situations that create these conflicting ideas in us almost.
Stopping myself from talking about this for the next 1 hour because you guys have come together again to teach something new in an offering called Carefree Companions. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about how that came about, what it is, and how it came about? Where did you see a problem, and did you design a program to address that problem? How did it evolve?
So it's really interesting that you're asking this question now, because one of the primary reasons that this program formed, and we've moved away, I don't know if I'd say we've moved away from the original structure, but it's evolved. But this was based on this idea of dialectical behavior therapy, which is for humans. And we've been talking about dialectics, which is the idea that these two things that seem opposite can both be true. And there's a whole form of therapy that is developed around that. And I became aware of this form of therapy, and there was what they talk about, or a couple of the things that they work on that are really big focuses of this approach are working on emotional dysregulation and impulse control. And it occurred to me that this was something that I felt was very applicable to dogs. And now I know other species as well, but at that time I was thinking about it for dogs. And so Irith and I talked about this and thought that we could use that human form of therapy where there's many things that we can't directly bring over, but there are some things that we can, and use that to inspire a program that is built around the ideas of emotional regulation and improved impulse control. And I could go on for a really long time, but I'll say one more thing and then I'll turn it over to Irith. So what they talk about in dialectical behavior therapy is that the reason, so this was originally used to treat humans that had very, very severe behavior patterns that were really dramatically impacting their quality of life, and often very self-destructive and destructive of relationships. And so the underlying theory is that people who have extremely strong negative emotions, it can be positive emotions too, but generally we're looking at negative emotions, that can lead to impulsive behavior as a way of trying to regulate those emotions. And so if you're working with an individual that has all these undesired behaviors, one of the ways to address that is by working on the emotional regulation piece so that they're not engaging in impulsive behavior to try and regulate their emotions. And so that's the big piece that we took. But along with that, and it may seem like they're unrelated, but they actually are quite closely related, is this piece of how do we work with the human guardians and how do we teach them to help their animals with that regulation. And so I'll let you talk about that, Irith, since I've been talking for a while.
Well, thank you. I think that was a really, really lovely summary of sort of how the program started. And it was one of these things where we were like, ooh, we could develop this thing and we could help people and help the animals they live with. And, you start hoping that you can improve the lives of both humans and non-human animals. And as we delved into it, we realized that, as is pretty much always the case for behavior consultants or a behaviorist, we are working with humans who have to then get that skill across, which meant that anyone that we're going to teach this to is going to need to develop the skill to teach to that human guardian of the companion animal, whatever that companion animal might be. So what initially started out as sort of almost a two-part program, where one part was, here are the skills we're teaching to ultimately to the companion animal. Skills to help with things like emotional regulation, things to help keep the animal in the moment rather than in a state of anxiety, worried about what will happen next. How do we, effectively distract them when distraction is the appropriate option? What can we do to teach them to regulate themselves? What can we do to promote relaxation and then put that relaxation on a cue so that the animal can bring themselves into a more relaxed state? We started out with, here's this set of skills. And then the other piece was, how do we get the humans to teach those skills to the animals living in their home? Because we, as the practitioners, we're not teaching the relaxation. We're not teaching the impulse control, the arousal regulation, the stress resilience that we're really aiming for. We have to teach that to a human. So we also had a series of sort of lessons having to do with, here are things that will help the human more effectively teach this to the animal in their home. And that was how it all started. So we have this massive set of handouts. It's actually a really, really robust set of handouts that include both what we originally thought of as human skills, which are, things like bringing yourself back into the moment, and skills that the animal needs to learn. And of course, all those animal-related skills had to be phrased in a way that would make sense to the humans. So this has all been a very long-winded way of saying we developed this whole program with all of these pieces. And originally, we had pictured that it would work a certain way, which we've discovered is not necessarily the ideal format for it. And so what we've started really leaning into at this point is helping practitioners convey this information and any other information they want to convey to the humans they're working with in a way that really helps the humans actually start making the changes they need to make. Because in the end, as I keep saying, I'm not training that dog in their home or the horse in the stable or the parrot in their room or whatever it might be. I am working through that person. That person is my way of getting help for the parrot, the horse, the cat, the dog, the ferret, whatever animal it might be. So over time, we have leaned more and more into human coaching skills and human teaching skills. And we spend less time on the animal companion skills because what we've found is that our students mostly already know those. They mostly already understand what, in some form or another, they have an understanding of skills that you can use with that non-human animal. But where the disconnect, to the extent that it's happening, where the disconnect tends to happen is in motivating the human, who's the one who's actually going to need to do the work, motivating the human to do it, teaching the human to do it. And so as the program has gone on, we've leaned more and more into the human teaching aspect of it. And fortunately, Kristina has an amazing background in pedagogy, so that's been incredibly helpful. I've learned so much. And we just keep building up how much support we give to our students in terms of getting better collaboration, I'm going to call it, getting better collaboration with their clients.
And I'll just add a one more piece to that, which is that one of the things we really emphasize in the program is that you're not just telling the client what to do. I mean, this is what Irith's getting at with the collaborative piece, is we're teaching them what to do, but part of that teaching means that you start with a lot of support, but you also have to have an intentional process of pulling back on that support so that the guardian learns how to engage in problem solving and adjustments on their own so that they're not dependent on the professional forever. And so that allows the guardian to really develop a solid set of skills that they can continue to apply, I mean, to the current animal, but any other animal they have in the future as well. So it increases the confidence and the competence of the guardians as well to help them feel stronger in their relationships with their animals.
And I'm just going to hop in here and say, and what that means is we're giving greater agency to that human guardian. And so ultimately they'll be able to apply that skill to the next companion animal in their home. And I've, throughout my career as someone who worked with clients, I have always said my goal is sort of, that classic saying, to teach them how to fish. And that is something that I literally just had a conversation with a horse trainer I know who said that this is something she struggles with, that her clients can't seem to solve the problem on their own. So that scaffolding piece that Kristina just mentioned of helping the person develop the skills to solve the problem on their own is also so important and really has become a huge focus of the program too. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
3, 4, maybe 5 things. Let's pick one. It's just fun to watch you guys bounce off each other. I can see the connection.
Yeah.
And hopefully you, the listener, can hear that connection. I have an opportunity to practice a wording of something that I learned a few days ago. We were lucky enough to host Dr. Susan Friedman in Animal Training Academy for a webinar, and she used the term dignity of risk. And she referred to this as how much bubble wrap should we put around our learners before it interferes with a meaningful and interesting life. And she was talking about our non-human learners, allow them to make mistakes. But it came to mind as you guys were talking, because am I understanding what you're saying correctly, that this is applicable to what you're talking about? You're talking about giving your human learners more agency to make mistakes and get it right, but allow their environment to provide the feedback so they can learn. Are we on the same page?
I think so.
Yeah.
I never quite thought about it that way. But yeah, I mean, that is really because we want, and I mean, obviously anyone that's learning a new skill is going to make mistakes, but I also think it's not just about making mistakes, right? Because it's also about just learning. I mean, I guess you could call this a mistake if you wanted to. I think of it more as just part of the learning process, but trying something and having it not quite work out and then needing to adjust it. Like we know as animal trainers that is always part of the process, unless you get super, like every once in a while, right? You'll get that dog or cat or whatever you're working with that they're so easy to work with. But mostly we have to adjust like a fair amount. And even if they are easy to work with, we have to adjust at some point to make things more challenging, right? So whether you want to think of it as making mistakes or just, part of the learning process, I think that absolutely that is part of what we're doing. Obviously, we want people to be safe. We're not talking about giving them a little bit of information and then pushing them off the cliff and hoping for the best. This is a very intentional, structured process where we're teaching people to, it's called scaffolding, right? So you build up a lot of scaffolding around the individual. And then as they get more adept at the skills and making those decisions on their own, you gradually start to remove that scaffolding until they can stand on their own. And we very much do the same kinds of things with the non-human animals that we work with, where it's exactly what you're talking about, giving them the freedom to make mistakes. And we know, or again, maybe we don't want to call it mistakes, maybe we just want to call it the normal process of learning, but that experiential learning of trying something on their own and having to adjust their behavior, that is actually probably very closely linked to resilience, because they are learning how to problem solve and adapt on their own instead of relying on someone else to do that for them.
And then it's interesting, as you're saying this, Kristina, it's occurring to me that scaffolding is almost I don't know how to put it, mirror image in a way of the appropriate challenge concept, where essentially the concept of appropriate challenge is, if something's too easy, the animal won't be interested. If it's too hard, they'll get frustrated. If you want to build their skills, I hope I'm summarizing this well enough, Kristina. It's very briefly summarized, but if you want them to build their skills, then you want to be somewhere in the middle, in that sort of sweet spot where they're engaged and they're interested and they have skills that they need, but maybe they're required to just go an inch beyond what they've been capable of before. So they're developing a new skill. And when you do that just right, you can take an animal from having no skill at something to having a lot of skill at something really fairly quickly. And that's sort of the flip side of this, is how much help am I giving them? And then when do I remove that help so that the challenge remains at an appropriate level for their skill set, and that we're building that confidence and competence and agency.
This is sounding a lot like animal training in terms of
it can't be.
Well, in terms of phrasing like the appropriate challenge.
Yes.
Humans are animals too. Learning is learning. Learning is learning down to a really ridiculously fairly simple brain level, actually, which is totally fascinating as a side note. But, learning is learning, and the things that work for non-human animals tend to work really well for human animals. We think that because we can use words with humans, we're supposed to teach them in some completely different way. I say we, I don't mean everyone, but there are many people who feel like, well, I can just explain it in words, and so that should be that. And shaping works for humans just as well as it does for non-humans.
And it is a different form of shaping, right? Because we're not talking about something like tag teach, although that is part of what what Irith teaches, because I'm really not trained in it. But it's almost is more of a verbal shaping process. So we're used to shaping. I've never talked about it in this way, so we'll see if I get myself confused. But when we work with animals, we're shaping physical responses. And when we're talking about this form of scaffolding with people, which I would still say is a form of shaping, it's more about how they're thinking. I mean, it relates to behavior too, but we're not looking at the mechanical skills of the human. We're more focused on how they're making decisions, and well, mostly how they're making decisions, really, and when they're deciding to use skills and which skills they're deciding to use and how they're adjusting them. And then there's also a big emotional component to it, right?
Yeah.
Of coping with all of the things that go along with having training an animal, and maybe they're not exactly what you expected, or maybe they are, but then that adds all this additional pressure. So we all know that training animals can be a very emotional experience, and living with them is a very emotional experience. And so there's that piece of things as well.
And what I think is interesting about this, to get back into our ands and our dialectics, is I'm sure that most people who work professionally with people who have companion animals have had this experience where you are in a situation, you think, well, I would use this skill. But the person in front of you, hopefully you've empowered them enough that they're now reaching for things on their own, and they come up with some different skill that they use in that scenario. And you're like, wow, that was another brilliant solution. So there's often more than one solution. And one of the things that's great about this scaffolding of, I really like looking at it as decision making. We're scaffolding the ability to think through the options. I am in situation X with my dog. Here are the 15 skills that my dog has that might apply in this situation. Here are the top 3, knowing my dog, that will work the best, and I'm going to choose one of those. And empowering the person to be able to look at the scenario and make those decisions and feel comfortable and confident making a decision. And if they get it wrong, also feeling confident enough to say, okay, now I know the next time that it's a Tuesday and we're coming around this corner and this dog appears behind the fence, I will try a different skill instead. All of those things are part of it. So I really like the idea of a scaffolding the decision-making process. I think that's a really nice way to look at it.
So another thing that I took away from our recent webinar with Susan Freeman, I'm just leveraging opportunities to practice things that I want to incorporate into my life. And I'm seeing them here, so that's why I'm bringing it up. But one of them is that we should visit a dictionary every single day. And so I've visited a dictionary while you guys are talking, and this is what I've come up with. So this is because there's a couple of words there, and it was valuable for me to reflect on what you were sharing and then to read the dictionary definition of a few words. So I think it'd be valuable for the audience as well. So firstly, dialectics. So that's not a term that I use often, but it's a term that I've used often in the conversations with with you two recently. So the Google AI overview, apparently, because that's what it gives you nowadays when you type that into Google, is dialectics means a method of reasoning and argument that finds the truth by looking at opposing ideas, resolving contradictions, and showing how things change through conflict or interaction.
Yeah,
that works.
People can't see it, but Kristina and Irith are nodding. and then I typed in as well, what is scaffolding in human learning? And it's come back with, again, Google's given me what it's calling the AI overview. It says scaffolding in human learning is a teaching method where a helper gives temporary support like modeling, breaking tasks into steps, or using visual aids, and then slowly removes that help as the learner becomes independent.
Yes. So very much like animal training, right?
Well, we
use different words. Yeah, we use different words, but it's the same. And again, with humans, it's much more verbal, but it's the exact same concept.
And it's valuable, I think, for this conversation. And I'll tell you where this value that I'm seeing is, and throw it to you guys and see what you think. We use different words, and it's like a different level of analysis of looking at the same thing. And I think what has been part of my journey and continues to be is everything goes through the Ryan Cartlidge filter, and I'm a fan of that filter. I like it; it serves me well. But it's very heavily leading on applied behavior analysis. So it just always tries to say, well, let's do an ABC analysis. Like, what's the observable thing here? Like, where are the antecedents and consequences? And it's a great opportunity to practice not ABA or this, but and this is true for all levels of analysis in our fields, right? Because there's big arguments about this, but this, and that's such a tough skill to just listen without judgment or critiquing or rightening or wronging or even comparing, and just see things from a different perspective. That's why I think it's valuable for the conversation we've had, because that's what we've talked about.
I mean, I think you brought up a really important point, because it is so easy. And I mean, you see it in certain branches of science where there's more than one school of thought, and people tend to get very entrenched in one school or another. And I mean, it's an example of something that's the human condition. We tend to get entrenched in one school of thought or another. It's just something about the way our brains are designed, apparently. And it is so important to step back and work to avoid getting trapped in that tendency. It's like anything else. Everyone has a bias, right? We can't get rid of bias. Bias exists. It is what it is. And so acknowledging our bias and working hard to be aware of it so that we're not trapped by it, I think, is always really important. So I love that you've brought that up. And I do want to say, I'm actually going to slightly change the topic and say one other piece of the verbal piece with humans is we unfortunately can't ask our horse why they don't want to go somewhere. We can only read their body language and read the environment and make guesses. But one thing that we can do verbally with humans is we can talk to them about their what I will call resistance, even though it's kind of a negative word. When we can see, oh, this is the perfect solution for you and your animal, and they don't want to do it. And so one of the great benefits we have as verbal animals is we can start to lean into that and figure out what's going on emotionally for that person that is creating this hesitancy about trying something that logically is clearly a great idea, or at least it's clearly logical to us, whether or not it's clearly logical to them. And so that's another one of the pieces of working with humans, is remembering that we are not that person, and they have reasons to be resistant to certain things. And sometimes those are very good reasons, and we do need a completely different tactic. And other times we just need to help them find their own reason to do whatever it is we think would be the ideal solution. And that, being verbal animals, is really helpful with. That is something where the being able to speak makes a big, big difference.
And I'm going to speak to this too, but then I do want to go back to dialectics. And a big part of that, right, is just listening. And when I say listening, I don't mean asking a question, listening to the answer, and then providing a solution. I mean asking a question, listening to the answer, and then asking more questions. And what we're basically talking about, to put another term on it, is motivational interviewing. And this is a approach that was developed, I think it was initially developed in therapy, but it's not exclusively used in therapy. And obviously we're not, neither Irith or I are trained therapists. I have a PhD in psychology, but I'm not clinically trained or licensed. So we're not going there to treat people or diagnose them. And that doesn't mean that we can't have conversations with them to figure out what is getting in the way of them being able to follow through on recommendations for working with their animal. And so there are techniques of having conversations with people where we can help them become more aware of their goals and their priorities so that they can make a decision on their own to make a change instead of us trying to convince them that they need to make a change, that they should. We were talking about shoulds earlier, pre-recording, but that, there's this bucket of shoulds, and sometimes that can create a lot of resistance in people, right? If they feel like they're being pressured to do something, that can create a lot of negative emotions that can actually make it less likely that they're going to do something. So if we can learn to have conversations with people from a more collaborative standpoint, where we're showing genuine interest and curiosity in what's going on with them, and then how can we bring those pieces together, right? Like, here's what the animal needs and here's what's going on with the human, and how can we bring them together in a way that isn't pushing down the needs of either party.
I was literally about to ask about motivational interviewing, so you made my job easier there. Thank you. I had that written down and I wanted to make sure that we got to that because I know that that's a big part of, am I correct? That's a big part of the Carefree Companions program that you put together.
It is, yeah. I would say it's become more prominent as we've gone through a couple different iterations of the program.
We've come to realize how very critical that piece is, because one of the big frustrations we hear from our students and, just from practitioners around us is, I have this great training plan and they're not following it. And it's sort of motivational interviewing. I feel like it started in the addiction space. I might be wrong about that, but I feel like it started in the addiction space, where people know they're drinking too much or they shouldn't do whatever substance it is they're doing, or shop 24 hours a day. I don't know, I'm making up random potential addictions here, and yet they continue to do it. And so the idea with motivational interviewing has been to help therapists figure out what the actual motivation, hence motivational interviewing, is. Like, logically you should not do X or you should do Y, and yet you don't do those things. What's the motivation that's driving you towards that? And I think that if we take that, which is what I've just said is very extreme because I'm talking about addictions, but if we take that and we apply that to the animal training and behavior world, we have people where, if it were my home, I've had this conversation with people where I'm like, if this dog were in my home, there would be no problem, because I just don't run my household the way they run their household. And the issue has to do with something about how their household runs, and they won't change what's running in their household. Why won't they change it? Well, if I can figure out why they won't change it, one of two things can happen. One is sometimes I can get them to talk themselves into making the change, which is sort of the really ideal, the sort of gold medal version of this. And sometimes I will come to the realization that they're not going to change this thing about their household, but somewhere in that conversation, I get a nugget of something else. And now that's a thread I can start to pull out and play with and figure out a different solution with the aid of that information that I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't kept asking questions.
I want to be clear that we are not claiming that we have some kind of magic solution that is going to solve every client problem you have ever had. I mean, there isn't. That solution does not exist. Just like there's no magic wand for animal training, there's no magic wand for working with humans or having conversations with humans. And it is much, I think it helps a lot. And I think, we don't have research on this, right? This would be awesome. There's research in the human behavior change that this is a very effective approach. We don't have research on it in dogs, but I think, or whatever species you work with, I think it's very, very likely that you're going to be less likely to lose a client in the first place because it is more collaborative and more supportive in that way. And B, even with clients that we would have never lost, we're likely to get better outcomes in the long run. And so I think, and again, I'm also not going to claim that this is, you'll go in and you'll read some stuff and you'll watch a lecture and then you're going to be amazing at motivational interviewing. This is a very difficult skill to master that I think is powerful enough that it is worth putting in the time and effort to learn it, because it can have a profound effect on our ability to help.
The great thing about the listeners of the show and Dr. Spaulding is that they are masters at breaking down difficult skills to master into small, achievable approximations. However, there is resistance, is the wrong word. See, I use the word friction there. I'm like, what is the friction?
Yeah.
But there's friction there, I think, in terms of applying it to each other. And speaking on behalf of myself, applying it to myself. Although I did share with Dr. Spaulding and Irith that I am tagging myself through this call. And I actually changed my tag point because I realized I didn't define the criteria for my first tag point well enough. But you guys know this, and we've got about 5 minutes before we've hit an hour. So I want to talk about the structure, which I believe is a 28-week journey in the Carefree Companion's certification. Tell the listeners a little bit about the mentorship structure.
I'll start and then I'll pass the baton, as it were, the imaginary baton. We have been, one of our goals as we've gone through iterations of this program is to make Carefree Companion more and more approachable. And one of the things about it was initially a year-long program, and that's a lot of commitment. And so we've been able to figure out ways to tighten it up and make it more effective and make sure that we're teaching exactly the skills we need and not focusing on things where less time was really required. So we've now narrowed it down to 28 weeks. It's going to be starting September 1st. We have live calls twice a month. And in addition to the live calls, there's a mentorship component. So I'll just speak really generally about the live calls and then I'll pass the baton. So the live calls, basically students are asked to watch or read, depending on the particular week, lectures, possibly direct source material such as scientific research articles, and there's online discussion forums, and then we do some kind of practical discussion in our live calls. And our live calls can be anything from we're literally spending an hour doing motivational interviewing round robin among the students or in breakout rooms among the students, to we're having a discussion about something in the material, to we've got a case study and we're going to break it down and see what ideas we can come up with. And there's a lot of other things that wind up happening in the live discussion calls. And one of the things that I personally love about the live discussion calls is that the group tends to very quickly come together and everyone becomes more comfortable sharing and contributing, and they start to see the value in their own contributions as well as the contributions of others.
Yeah. I think the live calls are where, we're all in one place at the same time. But in between those spaces, there are other things the students are doing so that you're not just, live call and then 2 weeks of dead space and then live call. So there are, as Irith said, there's discussion forums, and those are relatively structured. So you may be asking specific questions. They're not meant to take a huge amount of time to answer, but what they're designed to do is to get students actively working with the concepts and the materials that we're teaching in the course and to connect them to real world scenarios. And Irith mentioned that I have a fair amount of training in pedagogy through the university teaching that I've done. And then Irith actually has some training as well in pedagogy. And so, which is the sort of the art and science of teaching, right? And how do you effectively teach, which is much more than just providing lectures and then quizzing people. Some people can learn very, very well through that method, but everyone benefits from having more than that. And some people really need that additional structure and those additional activities to thrive. So the courses or the course structure is built very intentionally to support learning. And then there's also a mentorship component where each student has the opportunity to meet with us once a month so that we can find out, we're aware of what their goals are for the program, which sometimes they'll change throughout. And we can help to provide individual support to people to make sure that they are continuing to work towards those goals and make progress. And so you have this synchronous group component, you have an asynchronous component, and then you have some individual one-on-one mentorship as well. And we've found that combination makes it a very robust program without being completely overwhelming, because most people that are going through this program are already working full-time doing, something else. And so we don't want the program to be, we want it to be rigorous and high quality, but not overwhelming.
And I'll just add that for our graduates, we also have sort of a continuing program where about once a month, we do what is usually a case study call where any of the graduates can bring up a case that they're finding they have some challenges with. And then, all of the other graduates can chime in and help, and they can get advice from us as well. And we also have discussion forums for the graduates where they can post and support each other and ask each other questions. So that support that we offer does continue after graduation, just in a less intense form. It's a little less demanding, I guess, is the way to put it. They don't have to be present twice a month plus all the hours of study and so on.
And where would one go online to find Carefree Companions and visit your recently and beautifully constructed website and find the information about how to take the next steps? Because it's not, am I right that it's not the case of just going and signing up? You have to apply for the program?
Yes. And the reason you have to apply is because this program is specifically designed for people who already have the foundations of training and or behavior work and are looking for something more, right? So if a beginner came into this program, I think it would be a lot for them. It would be difficult for them to follow what's going on. And also they're going to be missing out on a lot of the foundational information. So this is really for people who already have, usually some kind of certification through, various different organizations and have some experience in the field and are really looking for something, the next step to go deeper. So you do have to apply. I don't think it's a particularly rigorous. We ask for some information about their background and experience and have them answer a couple questions. And then we make our determination based on that. And that information is on the website, which is carefreecompanion.com.
All right. Well, just before we wrap up, what is one thing about Carefree Companions that we didn't talk about today and that you want the listeners to know that we should have?
I'm going to say I think we have a lot of fun in the program. It's hard and It's fun.
That is fun.
Yeah. And I'm actually, I want to go back to this, this definition of dialectic because it came up before and I wanted to talk about it a little bit more. And I think that this is something that does come up in the program. And I actually think it's really, really important for learning. And that is the value of conflict or disagreement. And when I say conflict, I don't mean being angry at each other or disrespectful. What I mean is that people may have different views or opinions on something. And we put a lot of value on creating a space where they can ask questions and have different opinions. And then we can come together to find stronger solutions than if we didn't have that conversation. And I want to be clear, I am not saying that we're going to have people come in and make an argument for punishment, and then other people are going to make an argument for not using aversives, and then we'll find somewhere in between. That's not what I'm saying, because we have to look at what the science says too, and we will always come back to that. But we might be talking about frustration, for example. Maybe there's a conversation about frustration and what is the best way to deal with frustration and what approach do we want to take for that. And we really want people to be able to voice their opinions on that. And maybe sometimes people don't have a strong opinion, but they have a question that they want to ask. And we want people to be able to feel safe asking questions so that they're not going to be berated or put down for not knowing the answers, because that is how deep transformative learning happens, is by being able to put yourself out there and ask the real questions and listen to different points of view and then grow from that.
Beautiful. Well, we will link to Carefree Companions in the show notes, but you all have a phone in your pocket, so you can also just get your phone out and then type that into Google, and that will come up for you. Other than that, I think we will practice some gratitude. So grateful to this little chihuahua on my lap that's popped her head up to say hi at the end of the recording. And grateful to you, Irith, and you, Kristina, for hanging out with me in my Zoom room today. And for the thoughtfulness and collaboration and modeling the values that your Carefree Companion stands for, the Animal Training Academy stands for, just in this podcast episode today, and for packaging things in ways where we can build the skills of ourselves as professionals so that we can help our clients, so that they can help their dogs and their ferrets. And I remember ferrets being mentioned at some point today, and whatever species they're working with. So thank you for all the work that you guys do and for sharing it with us here at Animal Training Academy.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us on, because I think this is the longest conversation we've had together about the program and why we started it and what we want to accomplish. And I really enjoyed the experience, and I also appreciate you being willing to have us come on and talk about this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been an honor and a pleasure, and it's always a reason to be grateful when we get to talk to each other, and a reason to be grateful when we get to talk to you, because these conversations help all of us learn and grow, and it's such a privilege. So thank you very much.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartlidge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.